Mercedes have gained a massive boost in their fight to close the gap on the leading two teams in the 24 Formula One season, and this comes through the additional amount of time allocated to them in both the wind tunnel and CFD thanks to the reset after last weekend's Austrian Grand Prix. Now, Mercedes have been given an additional 10% of wind tunnel and CFD time, and now with the current championship positions being as they are, this leaves them with 15% more time in the wind tunnel and CFD over Red Bull, 10% over Ferrari, and 5% over McLaren. Now, that's fantastic news for the team, but it does leave them with a little bit of a question mark as to what do they do with this additional allocated amount of time in the wind tunnel and CFD. Do they on the one hand utilize all of this and put it all towards the W15 and this season, or do they take the majority of it or all of that additional time and put all of the research into the 2025 W16? That's the major question mark and the question that will be going throughout Brackley and Brixworth in ways in which to best utilize this time. And I'm pretty sure they will have a fairly good understanding of what they want to do regarding this additional time. Now, personally, for me, I would utilize the majority of it on this year's W15 and the 24 Formula One season. And I say that for a couple of reasons. But before I get into them, let me know in the comments down below whether you would utilize the additional time for this season or next. So here's my reasoning as to why I would want to utilize the additional time for this season and on the W15. The Mercedes Formula One team now are finally in a comfortable position for the first time within this ground effect era, in which the wind tunnel and CFD data is correlating with the real world data that they've gathered from all the upgrades in which they bring and put on to the W15. This started in Miami when they introduced a brand new floor, and has continued in subsequent races with every upgrade in which they've put on the W15. And I would just want to keep this positive trend continuing as they look to close the gap on the leading two of Red Bull and McLaren. Now, with upgrades also coming for this weekend's British Grand Prix at Silverstone and subsequent races, most notably for Hungary, I think Mercedes are going to be in a somewhat similar position as to where they are now. And I say that for one of two reasons. Red Bull have also got quite a big significant upgrade for this weekend with a brand new floor, most notably coming to the RB20. So if things stay the way they are now, it leaves Mercedes just, in Total Wolff's words, a couple of tenths of a second per lap behind the Red Bull outfit and the RB20 and Max Verstappen. Now, with this additional 15% of wind tunnel and CFD time in which they will be able to research further developmental parts and put those on the W15, this could later in the season see Mercedes fighting weekend in, weekend out, and being in contention for pole positions and the top spots or places, if you like, on the podium. And there's a secondary reason as to why I would do that, and that's all to do with the amount of wind tunnel and CFD time Red Bull have. So basically, Red Bull are going to have less and less time to utilize in the wind tunnel for this year's car, and of course they're going to have to focus on next. And I think the offset between the two teams in the allocation is going to play dividends for Mercedes. And so with that all being said, that's the reasons behind why I would want to utilize the majority of the wind tunnel time for this season and not next. Now, that's not to say I don't understand the other side of this argument, in which you would want to use the allotted time to research and develop the W16 for next season. Because of course, with the W15 now being in a place in which it's very stable, you're getting the correlation between wind tunnel and the real world Mercedes would find themselves in a much better position for the start of next season, with them utilising all of the time to create the baseline, the season starting W15 spec. And this is something the team have not been able to do for the last 2 seasons. So for example, this season Mercedes started off with what they thought was going to be a car with a certain operating window, but also somewhat where they would be in the pecking order. And that didn't come to fruition because at the time they didn't have the correlation between the virtual world and the real world. And this was also the case for the previous 2 seasons as well. Now this is the first opportunity, as I've just mentioned, to start a season on the front foot for the team, and they're not having to create updates to rectify the problems from which they had and they found out with all the previous cars, the W13, 14 and 15. And instead of having to correct issues and balance issues, weight transfer issues and whatever else it may have been, and the porpoising from the start in 2022, they can solely focus in on performance updates from the get-go, which is something they've not been able to do at all in this ground effect era. So there is that particular aspect in which I would fully understand if the team wanted to go that particular route. And perhaps with a little bit more thought and hindsight, I maybe would rather go down that particular route than to use it to upgrade the W15. Because if you think of it, let's be honest, Mercedes aren't winning the Constructors' Championship, and they're certainly not winning the Drivers' Championship, that's for sure this season, unless something miraculous happens in terms of Constructors. So I would actually feel it's more correct to utilise all of that time and effort to put into the W16 actually. So I would actually, now that I've been speaking within this video, I would actually utilise it more for the W60. So I've done a 360 within the space of this video. So yeah, there you go. Those are my thoughts and feelings on what I would have Mercedes do with this additional allocation of wind tunnel and CFD time that they have at their disposal. Right guys, that's the video for today. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like. Subscribe down below if you're new, and of course I will see you tomorrow, Friday, for a brand new Formula 1 video on all the upgrades the major Formula 1 teams have brought to Silverstone.